It started on a quiet Saturday morning in a small Oregon neighborhood, the kind where every house looked almost the same, but every life inside carried its own secret rhythm. Emily Harper's rhythm had become painfully predictable. Wake up, check emails, work on client designs, feed her cat Milo, and watch another show she'd already seen twice. She was 33, single, and quietly tired of pretending she liked being alone. Her friends had married, moved, or drifted away. Her parents called once a week out of habit. Life wasn't bad, it was just empty. That morning, she was trimming the rose bush near her porch when her neighbor, Claire Parker, called her name. Claire was one of those people who seemed to glow. Mid-30s, red curls always escaping her messy bun, and an easy smile that made people trust her instantly. "Emily, do you have a minute?" she asked, leaning over the fence that divided their yards. Emily smiled back, brushing soil off her gloves. Claire's tone had that nervous excitement of someone about to ask for a favor. Claire explained that her school had chosen her for a 2-month art residency in California, something she'd dreamed about for years, but it meant leaving town soon. Her husband David would stay behind to finish his novel while taking care of their 6-year-old daughter Lily. He's amazing, but between his writing and deadlines, he's going to need help. I was wondering if you could spend a few evenings here. Help with dinner, bedtime, that kind of thing. We'll pay you, of course, Claire said quickly, almost apologetically. Emily hesitated. She liked Claire and adored little Lily, but being involved in another family's life felt risky. Still, there was something in Claire's hopeful eyes that made her say yes before overthinking it. "Sure," she said, forcing a smile. "I'd love to help." The following Friday evening, Emily walked across the lawn to the Parkers' house. The porch lights glowed softly against the darkening sky. Through the windows, she saw David in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, moving with quiet focus as he cooked. He was tall, in his late 30s, with a calm presence and a kindness that showed in small gestures. How he knelt when talking to Lily, or paused to listen when Claire spoke. Emily had always thought he seemed grounded, someone who carried patience like a second skin. When he opened the door, his expression lit up with relief. "You must be Emily," he said warmly. "Claire told me you're saving my sanity." He laughed, a deep, easy sound that somehow eased her nervousness. Inside, the house smelled of garlic and rosemary, the kind of warmth she hadn't felt in years. Lily ran up with a big grin, holding a drawing. "I made this for you," she said proudly. The picture showed 3 figures, Lily, her dad, and Emily, standing under a bright yellow sun. Emily smiled, touched by the innocent gesture. She didn't realize then how much that drawing would come to mean later. The evening went by quickly. They ate spaghetti at the kitchen island. Lily chattered about her friends, and David asked about Emily's work. She told him she designed logos and ads for small businesses, but he seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions. After dinner, they read Lily's bedtime story together. When the little girl fell asleep, David offered Emily tea. They sat on the porch, listening to the crickets. The silence wasn't awkward, it felt easy, natural. That became their new rhythm. Emily came over 3 or 4 nights a week, sometimes helping with dinner, sometimes keeping Lily company while David worked. The little girl grew attached, and Emily found herself looking forward to those evenings more than she wanted to admit. They talked about everything: life in small towns, unfulfilled dreams, books they loved. David spoke of the struggles of writing a novel while trying to be a good husband and father. Emily confessed that after her last relationship ended, she'd built walls she didn't know how to take down. As weeks passed, she began to notice the small details: how David ran his hand through his hair when thinking, how his voice softened when he talked about Lily, how he always thanked her for coming, like her presence genuinely mattered. She told herself she was imagining things, that she was just lonely, but deep down, something unspoken was growing. One evening, a storm rolled in. The wind howled, lightning flashed, and the power suddenly went out. The room fell into darkness, and Lily squealed in surprise. David quickly lit a few candles, their flickering light dancing across the walls. Lily snuggled under a blanket on the couch, soon falling asleep between them. The rain hit the windows like soft applause, and for a while, they just sat there, watching the storm. In that golden candlelight, David turned to her. "You've made this summer easier than I ever thought it could be," he said quietly. His tone wasn't flirtatious, it was grateful, but the way his eyes lingered on her made her heartbeat quicken. Emily didn't reply. She just nodded, afraid her voice might give away too much. When the storm passed, something between them had changed. They didn't talk about it, but the air felt charged. Every glance, every shared laugh carried something unsaid. Emily started staying a little longer each night. Sometimes, after Lily went to bed, she'd find herself helping David with his writing, reading chapters, giving feedback. Their conversations stretched later into the night, blurring the line between friendship and something else neither wanted to name. But guilt crept in quietly. Claire called often, her voice full of excitement about her residency. "How are things back home?" she asked once. Emily's stomach tightened. "Everything's fine," she said, forcing a cheerful tone. But when she hung up, she felt a pang of confusion. Why did fine suddenly feel complicated? By midsummer, even small things felt different. When David smiled at her, it stayed with her longer than it should have. When she left their house, she missed the warmth before she even reached her own door. And though nothing had crossed a line, she could feel one approaching. Then came the evening that changed everything. David asked her to stay after Lily went to bed. He looked nervous, almost like he was rehearsing his words. "Claire's coming back next week," he said softly. "I wanted to thank you properly before she does." He handed her a small white envelope. Inside was a note and a check, but there was something else too. An offer she didn't expect. It wasn't romantic or dramatic. It was an opportunity. A proposal for her to illustrate the cover of his upcoming book, inspired by their late-night conversations. "I couldn't have written this story without you," he admitted. Emily looked up, stunned. For a moment, all the mixed feelings, gratitude, admiration, longing, collided inside her. She didn't know what to say, and as she met his eyes, she realized this wasn't just about work or art. It was about everything they hadn't said all summer. The next few seconds stretched endlessly, heavy with the question neither of them dared to ask. That was the night Emily understood. Some offers change more than your plans. They change who you are. The next few days after that evening were a blur for Emily. She couldn't stop thinking about the moment David handed her that envelope, the soft tremor in his voice, the quiet weight of what wasn't said. She had taken the job offer, of course. It was a dream opportunity to design the cover for a novel that had somehow grown from the very conversation she'd shared with him. But the idea of working closely with David again, even after Claire's return, filled her with a strange mix of excitement and unease. Claire came back that weekend, glowing with joy and stories from California. The moment Emily saw her, she felt a pang of guilt that she couldn't quite name. Claire hugged her tightly, thanking her again and again. "You have no idea how much peace of mind you gave me," she said with genuine warmth. "David said you were incredible. Lily adores you. I don't know how we'll ever repay you." Emily smiled, saying it was nothing, but her heart ached a little. She kept telling herself she hadn't done anything wrong, and she hadn't. But emotions had a way of making innocence feel heavy. That night, as she returned home, her phone buzzed with a message. It was David. "Thank you again for saying yes to the book cover. We'll start whenever you're ready." Just reading his name made her pulse quicken. She typed a reply, deleted it, and finally wrote something neutral. "I'm looking forward to it." Over the next few weeks, they met often, sometimes at her home studio, sometimes at his. David shared his manuscript, a story about love, choices, and second chances. The main character reminded her uncomfortably of him. Thoughtful, loyal, yet quietly burdened by what-ifs. As they discussed ideas, Emily realized how deeply the book reflected everything he had felt that summer. The loneliness, the longing, the questions about what makes someone truly happy. One afternoon, while they reviewed sketches in his living room, Claire walked in unexpectedly. She smiled brightly, completely unaware of the emotional tension in the air. "Wow, these are beautiful," she said, flipping through Emily's designs. "You two make a great team." Emily forced a smile, her chest tightening. David smiled too, but his eyes didn't meet hers for long. After that, Emily started pulling back. She began meeting David only through video calls or emails, trying to create distance. She told herself it was professional, but the truth was, seeing him in person made it too hard to ignore how much she cared. She buried herself in work, finishing the cover late into the nights. When she finally delivered it, David sent a message. "It's perfect. I couldn't have done this without you." That line replayed in her mind for days. Then came the launch event for David's book. It was held at a cozy bookstore downtown, full of warm lights and murmurs of excitement. Emily almost didn't go, but Claire had personally invited her. "You have to be there. Your artwork is part of this story," she'd said. So Emily went, dressed simply, trying to stay invisible among the crowd. But when David took the stage, his eyes found hers immediately. He spoke about how the novel came to life, about the people who inspired him, and then paused. "Some stories are born from quiet moments," he said, looking straight at Emily. "From people who walk into your life when you least expect it and remind you what connection means." The audience clapped, unaware of the undercurrent in his words, but Emily's throat tightened. She smiled politely, her heart racing. Claire beamed with pride beside her, completely oblivious. After the event, Claire introduced her to a few guests, then got pulled into conversation elsewhere. That's when David approached. "You came," he said softly, his voice almost lost in the noise. Emily nodded. "Of course. Congratulations, David, you deserve this." He smiled faintly. "You do too. You gave the book its face." There was a pause, the kind that felt like standing on a thin line. Neither spoke of the summer or the nights they'd spent talking under the storm. But everything unsaid filled the silence. Before she could leave, David reached into his jacket pocket and handed her a small wrapped box. "Just a thank you," he said. "Open it later." She didn't want to take it, but refusing would only make things awkward. "All right," she whispered. Their fingers brushed briefly, and even that small contact made her chest tighten. That night, back home, she opened the box. Inside was a simple silver pendant in the shape of a paper airplane. A symbol they had once joked about during a late-night conversation, about dreams that never quite land but keep flying anyway. There was a small note inside. "For the dreamer who helped me finish mine." Emily sat there for a long time, staring at the pendant. It wasn't romantic, not really, but it meant more than words could explain. She realized then that what she felt for David wasn't about wanting something forbidden. It was about being seen, truly seen, after years of feeling invisible. The following week, she decided to visit the Parkers' house one last time. She wanted closure, to thank them both properly, and to move on. Claire greeted her with her usual warmth and made tea. They talked about ordinary things, Lily's new school, Claire's next project, the neighborhood barbecue. Everything felt normal, yet Emily knew it was the last time she'd be here as part of their lives. When David came downstairs, he looked surprised to see her but smiled gently. "I wanted to thank you both," Emily said, keeping her tone steady. "For trusting me, for letting me be part of your world. It meant a lot." Claire squeezed her hand. "We should be thanking you. You've become family." Emily smiled, but her eyes drifted toward David for just a moment. He met her gaze, calm, respectful, full of quiet gratitude. That was all the closure she needed. She stood, hugged Claire goodbye, waved at Lily, and walked out. Outside, the air was cool, the sky painted with streaks of fading orange. She took a deep breath, feeling something loosen inside her. Not sadness exactly, but acceptance. Some connections aren't meant to last forever. They're meant to remind you that your heart can still feel. A few weeks later, she got a letter in the mail. It was from David. Inside was a copy of his book, signed with a simple message. "To Emily, for reminding me that sometimes the right person doesn't stay, but they still change everything." She smiled, placed the book on her shelf, and went back to her work. Life hadn't become extraordinary overnight. but she felt different. Lighter, more open, more herself. And as she looked out her window at the Parkers' house across the street, she knew that some chapters were meant to end quietly, without fireworks, just the soft closing of a door and the peace that follows. That night, she wore the pendant for the first time, not as a memory of what could have been, but as a reminder of what she'd found: courage, clarity, and the quiet kind of love that asks for nothing in return. Months passed, and life slowly found a new rhythm for Emily. The summer had left a quiet mark on her heart, one that didn't ache anymore but still lingered in memory. She poured herself into her design work, took on new clients, and even started attending local art gatherings. People began to notice her talent, and her name spread around town as a thoughtful, creative designer with a knack for capturing emotion in her art. Yet, every now and then, she'd glance at the silver paper airplane pendant hanging by her desk and feel that gentle tug of something unfinished. One evening in late fall, she received an unexpected email from a publishing company in Portland. They had seen David's book, and more importantly, her cover design, and wanted to commission her for a new project. It was a chance to work with a bigger team and a wider audience. The opportunity thrilled her, but it also reminded her of where this path had started. She paused for a long moment before replying, yes. That decision would quietly change the course of her life again. When Emily traveled to Portland to meet the publishing team, she was surprised to find the creative director was none other than Claire's college friend, Rachel, a bright, enthusiastic woman who remembered Emily's name from Claire's stories. "I've heard about you," Rachel said with a warm grin. "Claire says you're the most reliable person she knows. I'm glad we finally get to work together." The project was challenging but exciting, a story about rediscovery and finding meaning in unexpected places. As Emily worked on the illustrations, she realized how much she had changed. She no longer worked from fear or loneliness. She worked from truth, from experience. Every color, every line carried something she had lived through. It was like she was quietly telling her own story through someone else's. In the evenings, she often walked through the city streets after work, soaking in the energy, the lights, the smell of rain, the sound of strangers' laughter. She wasn't lonely anymore. She had begun meeting new people through her work and art circles. One of them was Daniel, a photographer who had a calm, grounded way of seeing the world. They met at a creative event, bonding over their shared love for visual storytelling. Daniel was different from anyone she had known, quiet but deeply curious, with the kind of presence that didn't demand attention, but made her feel safe. They started collaborating on small projects, his photos, her designs, and soon their professional partnership began to turn into something more personal. He never rushed her, never asked questions she wasn't ready to answer. But he noticed things. He noticed how she paused before trusting someone, how she sometimes drifted into silence when talking about her past. One evening, as they walked by the river, Daniel asked softly, "Has someone ever made you forget how to breathe?" Emily smiled faintly, caught off guard by the question. "Once," she said. "But it wasn't about love. It was about realizing I could feel again." Daniel looked at her for a long moment, as if understanding something unspoken, then simply nodded. "That's a good thing," he said quietly. Over the next few months, their connection deepened. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, but something gentle and patient, the kind of bond that grew in quiet moments. He helped her hang her artwork in a local gallery. She helped him design a small book of his photography. They laughed easily together, shared late dinners after work, and found comfort in the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. Then, one winter afternoon, Emily received an envelope in the mail. It was from David. She hadn't heard from him in months. The letter was short but thoughtful. He thanked her again for the book cover and told her it had been nominated for an award. "I thought you should know," he wrote. "It's your work as much as mine." He also mentioned that he and Claire had decided to move to the East Coast for a new opportunity, a fresh start. Emily read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. There was no ache this time, just a soft smile. Some chapters really did end the right way. She picked up her sketch pad and started drawing. Not for a client, not for anyone else, just for herself. The lines flowed easily, as if her hands had finally caught up to her heart. That evening, Daniel came over with 2 mugs of hot cocoa and saw her drawings spread across the table. "These are beautiful," he said, picking one up. "They feel peaceful." She nodded. "That's what I've been learning. Peace can come after chaos if you let it," he smiled, setting the mug beside her. "You know," he said, "some people spend their whole lives waiting for closure. But you," he paused, searching her eyes. "You turned yours into art." Emily didn't reply. She just looked at him, really looked, and realized she wasn't afraid anymore. Not of love, not of losing, not of beginning again. The world that once felt small now seemed wide open. Months later, her new book cover was released, and it became a quiet success. Her art began appearing in local exhibitions, and she was invited to speak at a design conference about creative healing. When she stood on that stage, telling her story of growth and rediscovery, she didn't mention names or details, only emotions. She talked about how people cross our paths for reasons we might not understand at the time, and how every connection, no matter how brief, shapes us in some way. After her talk, someone from the audience came up to her and said, "Your story, it makes me want to believe again." Emily smiled, realizing that maybe that was her purpose all along, to help others see beauty even in heartbreak. That night, Daniel took her to dinner to celebrate. As they walked home through softly falling snow, she reached into her coat pocket and touched the silver pendant she still carried. It wasn't about David anymore. It was about gratitude. For what had ended, and for what had begun. She turned to Daniel and said softly, "You know, I used to think one moment changed my life, but now I think it was every little one after that." He smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Then here's to all the little moments," he said. Emily laughed, her breath turning to mist in the cold air. And for the first time in a long time, she felt entirely at peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because she finally understood how everything had led her here. As snow blanketed the quiet streets, she knew that some offers, even those that begin as small, unexpected gestures, could change your life forever. Spring arrived with a quiet beauty that seemed to mirror Emily's own peace. Her life had changed in ways she never expected, not through grand events, but through small, steady moments that built into something whole. The book project she worked on in Portland had opened new doors. Her designs were now featured in magazines, and people began recognizing her not just as a talented artist, but as someone whose work carried emotion. Yet, even as her career blossomed, she stayed grounded, grateful for the path that brought her there. Daniel was by her side through it all. Their bond had grown deeper, steady like the rhythm of the seasons. They shared quiet breakfasts before work, long walks after dinner, and laughter that made ordinary evenings feel like something more. Emily often caught herself looking at him when he wasn't watching, the way he focused when taking photos, or how he smiled when he talked about something he loved. It wasn't a perfect story, but it was real, and that made it beautiful. One weekend, Daniel invited her on a short trip to the coast. They drove for hours, windows down, music playing softly. The salty breeze filled the car as they reached a small seaside town, calm and untouched by the noise of the city. Emily hadn't realized how much she needed a break until then. They spent the day exploring, taking photos and sketching by the beach. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Daniel turned to her and said, "You know, sometimes I think life waits for you to stop running before it shows you where you belong." Emily smiled, brushing her hair back from the wind. "And where do you think that is?" she asked. He looked at her with a quiet certainty. "Right here." The simplicity of his words made her heart still. For the first time in a long time, she realized she had stopped looking backward. That night, they sat on the porch of their small rental cabin, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. The sound of waves filled the air. Emily felt calm, not because she had everything figured out, but because she finally understood that peace wasn't about having answers. It was about trusting the journey. Daniel reached over and held her hand, and for a while they said nothing. Words weren't needed anymore. A few weeks later, Emily received another letter, this time from Claire. It was warm and full of updates about their life on the East Coast. Claire mentioned that David's book had won an award and that he'd dedicated part of his acceptance speech to a friend who helped him believe in beginnings. Reading those words, Emily felt a soft ache, not pain, but gratitude. Some stories didn't need to continue to matter. She sent back a short note wishing them both happiness and meant every word. As months passed, Emily and Daniel's relationship deepened into something steady and kind. They decided to share an apartment in Portland, a bright, cozy space filled with plants, books, and sunlight. Daniel's photos lined the walls, and Emily's art hung beside them, blending their worlds together. They didn't talk about forever much. They just lived it, one day at a time. Then one afternoon, while sorting through old sketches, Emily found her first design, the cover she made for David's book. She looked at it closely, tracing the outlines with her fingers. It wasn't just art anymore. It was a reminder of who she used to be, scared, uncertain, but full of hope. She realized that every twist in her journey had brought her to this moment, one of quiet joy and balance. Later that evening, she told Daniel she wanted to start her own design studio. Something personal, where art could be more than business. Daniel supported her instantly, helping her set up a website and taking photos for her portfolio. They named it Silverline Studio, inspired by the paper airplane pendant she still kept by her desk. To Emily, it represented not just creativity, but courage, the willingness to let go and see where life could take her. The studio slowly gained attention. Clients loved her ability to blend emotion with simplicity. Her story began inspiring others, and soon, she was invited to give a talk at a creative retreat, the same kind of event where she had once been just a listener. Standing before a small audience, she spoke honestly about her path, about loss, rediscovery, and learning to see beauty in change. Sometimes, she said, her voice steady, life gives you people not to keep them, but to help you remember who you are. And when you finally understand that, you stop holding on to what's gone and start embracing what's here. The room was quiet for a long moment after she finished. Then came gentle applause, not loud or forced, but warm and genuine. She felt tears in her eyes, but they were happy ones. After the event, Daniel met her outside with a bouquet of sunflowers. "You were amazing," he said. "I'm proud of you." Emily smiled and hugged him tightly. "I think I'm finally proud of myself too," she whispered. As they drove home that evening, the city lights blurred outside the window. Emily leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder, watching the world pass by. For once, she didn't think about what could have been. She only thought about what was, this moment, this peace, this love that felt earned, not stumbled upon. Months later, Silverline Studio became a creative space for others, artists, writers, and photographers who needed a place to start again. Emily often guided newcomers, sharing not just her skills, but her story. People said her warmth made them feel seen, and every time she heard that, she smiled quietly. That had always been her wish, to make others feel less alone. One evening, long after everyone had left, Daniel walked into the studio holding 2 cups of coffee. The sunset filtered through the windows, bathing the room in gold. "It's beautiful here," he said softly. "You made it feel like home." Emily looked around, at the walls filled with art, at the plants by the window, at Daniel standing beside her, and she nodded. "It is home," she said. They stood together, watching the light fade. And as the world outside turned quiet, Emily felt something she hadn't in years. Complete. She had started with an offer that changed her life, one that led her into unknown places, through moments of confusion and hope. But it had brought her here, to love, to peace, to purpose. As the last rays of sunlight touched her face, she whispered, "I think I finally found where I'm meant to be." Daniel smiled, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "Then let's stay right here," he said. And they did, not in a grand or perfect way, but in a real one. Together, They built a life made of quiet mornings, shared dreams, and the understanding that sometimes the most unexpected offers are the ones that lead you home.